Welcome to Loving God and Loving Life. We're in Acts chapter 17, where the theme is Paul and Silas preach and are persecuted in Thessalonica. And then Paul goes to Athens, where he preaches from Mars Hill, a famous sermon from Mars Hill about the unknown God. Now, this is, to me, just such an amazing chapter. We see how far Paul stretches himself to connect with them and their culture. We usually get the thought that, if I'm going to share Christ with somebody, I got to be careful. They've got a lot of goofy thinking, and I might have to correct some of that before I, share Christ with them. Well, Paul doesn't. He's in a Greek culture. Athens is in Greece. In Greek culture, they had 1,000 gods, and they believed that there were many gods that they didn't even know. So throughout the city of Athens, they had all sorts of idols. And then because they knew there were many more, they didn't know their names. They had one idol that had the inscription to an unknown God. So that here was their thinking, that when one of these unknown gods, Greek culture believed that these gods would occasionally visit as men. When one of these gods came down and he couldn't find his statue here, well, we could just take him to this one and we could say, oh man, we knew you were up there. We knew you were powerful, but we just hadn't met you yet. We hadn't met you. And now that you've revealed yourself, man, but we knew you were there, so we built this one for you. It was kind of the all-purpose idol, kind of covering the bases for them. Well, Paul, he sees this, and he goes to that idol and says, by the way, in the sermon that he's preaching to them, he's saying, I found this, this inscription on an altar to the unknown God. And he said, this God, whom you worship without knowing it, is the one I'm telling you about. He's the God who made the world and everything in it. So Paul points to that idol and say, by the way, that represents the real God, the true God, the living God. And first of all, you notice that with people who don't really know God at all yet, he doesn't start with Jesus, interestingly enough. He starts just by revealing God, the creator of all things. But what is amazing is he bends over backwards to connect to their beliefs. He doesn't correct it. He doesn't say, oh man, those are idols. God condemns idols. Friends, you got to know this. 100 out of 100 rabbis back in Israel would have had Paul stoned if they would have found out that he's pointing to idols saying this represents the living God. What is the point? Friends, here we see Paul doing everything he can to just make some friends, to connect with them. Yeah, is he bending over backwards? You better believe it. He's just connecting with them, trying to share the truth that there is one true God who created everything, who owns everything. Paul is not hung up on much of anything, quite honestly. He's going to share God, the love of God, and ultimately lead them to the person of Jesus Christ. That's our job. We don't need to fix everything. We don't need to correct everything. Just share the love of God, which is why we pray this prayer every day. God, today, send me one person today to share your love with. But friends, I hope you never forget that doing God's will and loving God, it's the only way to live a life that you love.